Welcome to another episode of Call to Marriage. I'm Marcia.
And I'm Thomas.
And today we are talking about how we named our 2 children.
Yep.
So a little bit of storytelling here, and just thought it was an interesting topic because every parent has to go through this,
Yeah.
And I'm sure couples fight over it or there's conflict. We like to address all of the topics of life, concerning marriage and family and so it's not necessarily that this is going to be like a teaching or something. Not that. I actually didn't prepare anything of the sort. It's just storytelling, and then maybe it'll be insightful as to how we decided to go about it. So
yeah. Hopefully it resonates with you. It's the mundane things, the little things in marriage that can sometimes bring the biggest conflicts.
Absolutely.
And this is definitely one of those things where I want this name, I want that name. How do we agree on a name for the child?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we want to talk about from our perspective and how we've dealt with choosing names for our 2 sons.
Mm-hmm. So let's start with Charlie. His name is not Charlie, by the way. That's just like a nickname that you know we grew fond of or whatever. But his name
is Charles.
Yes, is Charles. His full name. You want to say it?
Well, I guess it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't really matter. Everybody knows our last name. The reason why I said that is because to point out the junior aspect, because that's a part of the name. Oh, yeah.
It is relevant, especially for this discussion. You're right. Yeah. His full name is Charles Opon Jr.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So how did we come up with that name, my love?
What do you remember about Charlie's name?
Well, we should lead by saying we don't find out the gender of our kids before they're born.
No, we
don't.
The
sex.
Yeah.
So we had no clue what we would have. So we had to, consider options for a boy and for a girl.
Yeah.
And even with considering, we didn't have a decisive name. Like if it's a boy, it's definitely going to be this. And if it's a girl, it's definitely going to be this.
Yeah.
Necessarily. So when he was born and we saw that it was a boy, he was actually unnamed for 6 days, I think.
More than that.
More than that? Yeah. He was unnamed for a little bit, let's just say.
Yeah. Unusually long. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Usually long for American standards anyway, right?
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in some cultures, they wait for 40 years.
For how long?
40 days. 40 days before naming the baby. 40 years.
Oh, my God. Jeez.
Real definition of life begins at 40.
Right. Yeah.
But now that you're 40, you're about to start living. Your name is...
maybe a name change, is Jacob to Israel or Abram to Abraham. So,
oh boy.
Yeah. So we basically just talked it out.
We did.
There's actually not that much interesting about it. But yeah, we just, we talked. We asked each other, or I think I asked you probably, what are your thoughts, especially seeing that he turned out to be a boy. I think, my husband is a leader. I'm interested in his, his input, no matter the gender of the child, but I think more especially if it's a boy, and even in this case, a firstborn son, I think I highly was interested in honoring what you had to say.
Yeah.
So I will say my thoughts going into it were that I preferred names, this is even since before I got married. I preferred names that were more unique. I didn't really care for names that were sort of really common, like Charles.
Yeah, traditional names.
Traditional English names anyway,
right.
Michael or Adam or John. I don't know, John. Yeah, I wanted things that were unique. I searched through the Bible for unique names that roll. Yeah. I still wanted to roll off the tongue a little bit. But, the Bible names don't quite roll off the tongue.
No, they're not.
And then you name your kid a name from the Bible. Not that there's anything wrong with naming your kids from the Bible, but I will say we're mispronouncing most of those names, right? They're not English names.
Absolutely.
We Americanize them, we English them or whatever. So, it doesn't really feel all that authentic anyway to name your kid some of those names. Yeah, no offense.
A lot of those names have some special sounds that we don't even make in English.
Right. So, and then the ones that are more easy to pronounce are more common, like the Benjamins, the Emmanuels, Isaiah. But yeah, so So that was my thought going into it. So I will say, you know, when you first proposed to name him after your dad, I totally understood.
Which is Charlie, by the way. We're still talking about Charlie.
Yeah, we're still talking about Charlie. Charlie is named after Thomas's dad.
Yeah.
Yes. So I did feel like, I don't know, disappointment might be too strong a word, but just a little bit of like, oh, that's like such a common name, Charles.
Yeah.
But it's about the significance. I like the idea that his name had a significance to my husband, to ourselves. So it was easy to go along with. I didn't have any argument against it. I don't know what you remember of it. Maybe you can tell your side of the story. Yeah, I was fine with that.
Yeah, we didn't have any, arguments over it. I think oh boy, this kid. Yeah, I really need to commend you because I feel like you gave me a lot of space, a lot of room to make that decision for both of the boys, actually. And that's something I respect because it's not that I set out to be a very like hyper traditional person, but that's actually how it's done where I come from. The naming of the child is, quite frankly, the husband's responsibility. The husband, the wife doesn't even. Well, I'm sure husband and wife will have conversations, but it is almost the sole prerogative of the husband. So the husband comes up with a name, right? And so the husband has to put together the naming ceremony for both the child and the wife, to celebrate both of them. And then at the naming ceremony, the husband will give out the name. So, of course, we didn't go that route. We didn't have any naming ceremony for them. But I like how you give me a lot of space. You give me room to, feel that sense of responsibility and also honor. It's not just the responsibility of finding the name, but in a lot of ways, it is you honestly just honoring me and saying, well, you just tell us what the name is, and I will let you know what I think. But quite frankly, you can choose, and that's exactly what you did with this one. We'll get there, but so with Charlie, we were contemplating. I think we agreed on a name for a gal, Stella, because we both. It's your friend, but it's our mutual friend, our mutual Chinese sister. She's a friend. She's like a sister to us, that we had in China. She's actually been here to the States to see our side of the family. And then I had an aunt who, she's passed away now, but she passed away when you were pregnant.
Yeah.
So typically, traditionally, this is what happens from where I come from. When you are the male child, your first child, if the child is a girl, you would name her after your aunt, your most beloved aunt. Let's put it that way. And she loved us. My aunt Stella, she loved us. We loved her. So that was the plan. So there was no argument there. We have a friend from China named Stella, a good Christian friend, good Christian sister, and then I had an aunt. So we had agreed on that if it's a girl, we're gonna name her Stella.
But it had mutual significance.
Right, it had mutual significance. Yeah. But it turned out to be a boy. So we were like, okay, well, it's not a girl, so yeah. So I had a call from my mom, and this is a little story behind that. And naming Charlie or naming your first born son after your dad is also very traditional where I come from.
Sure.
So, but it was part of my considerations. It wasn't like I wasn't strong on it, but it was one of the things I considered, or one of the names I considered. So my mom called me. I had a chat with my mom, and she brought it up, and she sort of reminded me that your I think your dad would be really honored if you named your son after him. We've had conversations around that. He's going to understand if you don't do it, And that's why he hasn't called you to tell you anything, but I think he would like it. So, I sat on it for a number of days. Um, and I decided, okay, I'll honor him. Now, my dad and I, we haven't really, spent a lot of time together. And I think I actually, during Charlie's third birthday, we recorded a video where I talked about how significant the name is for me, because my dad, I never got a chance to live with my dad. So to me, it felt like, okay, well, I can honor my dad, but I can also have my own child support with me. And even at this age, I still long for a relationship with my dad where we can talk. And I don't have that yet. So after praying about it, that's where my mind was. It's like, okay, well, maybe this is going to be my own child support who will live with me. I would not long for him as I've longed for my dad. And I'll get to enjoy, his company. So it made sense to me. My heart was at peace. I felt restful about it. It just, as soon as I got there, the whole thing made sense to me. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna name him after my dad, and I'll be content.
So I feel like when you're naming someone after someone, there can be different significances. So I feel like a lot of times when people name their children after someone, they think they want the person to be like the person they named them. That's why a lot of times they will name their children after one of the 12 tribes of Israel, or David, or Isaiah the prophet, or Ezekiel, but they would not really name their child Saul or like Judas, or, they kind of stay away from names where people didn't have a good end or whatever. Even Solomon, people are wary to name their child Solomon.
Yeah.
So, with you not having had a good relationship with your dad, there could have been a possibility of viewing the name negatively in that sense. But another way of viewing a name is like to redeem the name, like
to reinvent it.
Yeah, to reinvent it. And I feel like that's the approach or like the perspective that I had about naming him after your dad, is that I feel like it was redemptive. I feel like he doesn't have to follow in the ways of your dad's footsteps that were, more on the disappointing side. He can take good things after your dad and still be his own person that would be like, that will surpass your dad, which is, by the way, what we want for our kids, by the way. So it's not to insult you or your dad, because I think we want our kids to be better than us. Like, I hope my kids will be better than me. I want them to surpass me. So I think that was kind of my thought when you named him that. I thought it was good. Yeah.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think that's the joy of every parent, right? You want your kids to be more than you. And also, in Charlie's case, you are right in the sense that I also thought about that. I thought, I always say this. I wish my dad would just put his hand on me and pray for me sometimes. It's never happened, right? So, but even at 3 years old, Charlie lays his hands on me and prays for me. And whenever he does that, I just thank God. I'm like, yep, that's the child support I've been longing for. And so you are right in saying that sometimes, you name people after other people so they can reinvent the name or whatever the character or the associations are. And I think Charlie is exactly that. The way that we have a very special bond. I mean, he's still young, but we do have a very special bond. I like spending time with him. I love to be in his, company. We both enjoy each other, and every time we both pray and do godly things together, my heart is just so full, because all my life I have longed to be like that with my dad. I never got that. Now, I do still appreciate my dad. I think he did his best. That's what life is about, right? He got to a certain point. I am taking the baton. I'm also carrying it. Charlie's also going to take it. And it excites me to see how he's not like he's living above the name. He's not just living up to my dad's name.
Right.
He's like stretched it. He's taking it even at 3 years old, with his gift, his character, his demeanor, his diligence. Like he has some things from my dad. My dad loves music. He's always one of his biggest dreams was to have a music studio. Charlie loves music. Um, he's very hardworking. Charlie's very diligent, and so on. I can go on and on and on. But my point is, it's exciting to see a different version of Charles Sapong, who has already exceeded all the expectations and is already being used this mightily by God. I wish I get to the point where, or my dad and I, we get to the point where we're able to candidly have conversations like this, because sometimes I wonder what is in my dad that didn't come out. You know, is he hiding some aspects of himself, some gifts, some talents that he never brought out for us to see?
Oh, so many dads. Yeah.
So I, I pray that one day we'll get there and we'll be able to open up and have these conversations. But sometimes I look at Charlie and I wonder, what if my dad was made to be like Charlie? And he just didn't bring them out. And, his path took him in a different way. And God is just bringing everything back full circle, and just doing his thing through Charlie. So it excites me. And my dad himself is also pleased. No, he doesn't say as much to me, but I hear people tell me things.
Who wouldn't be pleased to have a child named after them?
Right. My mom tells me things, and I know that my dad is very proud of, first of all, me, and also of his grandson. I think he's very pleased that Charlie's carrying his name.
I thought I would interject a bit of thought, I don't know, just thinking aloud about, like the significance of a name before we go to Nt's name.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it's not like I did a lot of research about godly ways of choosing names or something like that. But I do think there is like some significance, but we don't want to make it significant.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, because I think we see instances in the Bible where God gave people names to name their children. And that's very spiritual, and also we see that names have significance even when God didn't tell someone, where that when the child was born, they say, oh, the child was named this because of this. Yeah. So I think names have significance, but I also just want to, I guess, interject here, not to be overly superstitious too. Because I know we're talking about carrying on legacies or whatever, but I don't actually think because you name your kid Judas, he's going to be like Judas. There's in some Spanish speaking cultures, Jesus is a popular name. But not every Jesus is like Jesus. Most of them are not. You know what I mean? So
majority of them are not.
Right, exactly. So it's just I think we shouldn't overthink that aspect in terms of if they're named after someone. But I do think it's nice for the name to have a significance, whether it's a family significance or whether the name means something, means a place of significance or means something about their identity or whatever the case. I think that's all good, but we shouldn't spiritualize it, except that the Spirit himself gave you the name.
Yeah.
Emmanuel, God with us. That's very spiritual, but
right.
Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. I think names are what we make them. Perhaps in different cultures, different names mean different things to different people, right? So, and I think that's very plausible. So with Charlie, there are things that, let's say, spiritually speaking, there are things that I perceived about him. They have nothing to do with his name, but they have to do with him. You know what I mean? Right from when he was in the belly, when I would pray and I would sense certain things about him. They don't really have any strong connections with his name. He could have been named any other name, and it wouldn't change what God has willed for him. That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mean the names don't have any significance. They do. But my point is, there's more to a human being. There's more to a person
Right.
than just their name. Just because you're named after someone or in a certain way, just because you name your son Bezos doesn't mean they're going to be a billionaire
Right.
or they're going to build the next Amazon. It doesn't work like that. There are other factors involved when it comes to, getting ahead in life like that. So Charlie is certainly his own person.
Mm-hmm.
It just so happens that we named him after his grandfather, and there are some significance, or there is some significance to that, but it doesn't really affect what he really is as an entity or as an individual.
Yep. Now, granted, like I said, this is not a teaching, so I would be curious to do like a deep dive into names and naming and stuff like that. So, take what we're saying with a grain of salt. But I just think,
Yeah.
sometimes people really do. It's almost like self-fulfilling prophecy at times. Like they name their child and then they try. And then like when bad things happen, it's like, oh, it's because of this or whatever. Or people name their child Mary, hoping their daughters will stay virgins. They don't. They, like,
Oh boy.
Anyway. Anyway, so
I bet you there are prostitutes named Mary.
Oh, of course, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think it's just an orientation thing.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Like
you orient yourself,
Mhm.
and then the orientation causes you to do certain things or to do things in certain ways. So you name your child after Pope John Paul, and then because of that, you orient yourself to maybe sacred things like going to the mass if you're Catholic, by the way. And then you do certain things that just because you named him after
Right, it's kind
the
of more
Pope,
environmental than spiritual.
right.
Like
You
you had
orient
a
yourself
significance,
in
so
that,
yeah.
right. Or you name your son after a soccer player. And then because of that, you orient yourself towards soccer. You start training them.
Right.
And then who knows? They might become the next big star, or maybe they will never even enjoy playing soccer. So they may not even like soccer as a sport. They might like something else. And that's where parents don't have to force things on their children. But maybe they will. And then it all just, everything works together. And then you think, I knew I should have named you. I mean, I knew I should, I had to name you after this soccer player. Right? It's not really because of that. You put in the work, you orientated yourself. Is that a word? Oriented yourself toward that. And then you put in the work, you work toward that, you train the child, and, you got the results. Yeah.
Yes. Now, to be clear, there are prophetic things, but we're talking about in the absence of a prophetic word from the Lord about the naming of your child.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So then there's NT. Yes, who's also a junior. So tell us about naming him.
So this is the short version. I named him after myself because, and this is it's almost inexplicable. After I considered all the different names, we considered naming him after Marcy's dad and a few other names that I had in mind. But then it took a few days for him to be named. It just hit me. It was just so strong on me that nope, name him after yourself. So each time I would pray about it, I wrote down a few names, and then it was just pointing directly to it. Now, I didn't necessarily have any strong interest in naming him after myself, but upon deliberating with myself, praying into it, it was just pointing strongly at me, and then I decided I'll name him after myself, but not with Thomas, without Thomas. So I named him with what I would call my real Ghanaian traditional name, no English name. So I was named after my grandfather, my dad's dad. His name was Inti, so I was named after him. My name is Inti. If you went to my hometown, you would hear that name more than Thomas. That's what I go by. So I decided to go with that and do away with Thomas. Quite frankly, I'm not a huge fan of Thomas. I do carry it. And for myself, I think it's great. But I think it's one of those names that, just like you're saying, it's too common. I just wanted him to stand out. And I wanted to give him my real name. Not that Thomas isn't my real name, but I
And that's
think
also after your grandfather, by the way. The
my
Thomas
grandfather
part
is
too.
also was also Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided, I want to give him the name my grandmother, who's the one who named me, said I should be called. My grandmother didn't say, call him Thomas. She specifically said, call him Quabenanti. That was my name. But my grandfather was Thomas. So, I went to school and then everyone had English names. And it's like, okay, well, my grandfather is Thomas. And so I started using it. But my real name is Quabenanti. And then, of course, my dad's name, my family name is Opong. So we add that. So his name is Inti Opong Jr. And I'm very pleased with that. I think it's very peculiar. It will make him stand out. And Inti means born for war, from what I learned from my grandparents. So it's like a warrior name. It has priestly connotations and leadership connotations. So I like that. And I have seen all those in my personal life. I perceive myself as a leader. I perceive or consider myself as a warrior, even though I never went to the military. But you get my point. So he carries my name.
So that name, from my perspective, I immediately loved. I like it. I love it. And I didn't even really, I knew that you were in tea, but it's not something we talked about a lot or used a lot prior to the moment of having this child. So in some sense, it was a little bit of a new name for me to hear. And but I just immediately liked it because it's unique, but it's also like short, just 3 letters.
Yep, NTI.
Yeah, I like that. So it has a simplicity to it. I don't know how unique it is in Ghana anyway, but it's unique here. Now, at the same time that I immediately liked it, I also immediately was like, okay, how are Americans going to pronounce this? Including myself, first of all, and then how am I going to teach other people to say it properly, And we talked about, whether we would let people, get away with mispronouncing his name or whether we would just force people to adapt, to pronounce his name correctly. Right. Yeah. And so that has been a process for me because his name didn't roll off my tongue immediately, but honestly, neither did Charlie's name. That's,
took a while.
Yeah, it took a while because I think we delayed naming Charlie. So it's like I had to look at him and sort of get used to the him having a name at all, even, and then to have the name that he had. So it was the same thing with NT. It's like it takes a little bit of time to get used to it, and then it just rolled off my tongue. But explaining to other people, I have to refrain from I'm trying to read their face, did you? Because I know they don't. So many people don't get it. They're like, okay, can you say it again 20 more times so I can really get it?
I kind of like that.
So, yeah.
It makes it peculiar,
Yeah.
It's not, you have to know him to know him.
Yeah.
You have to really know his name. If you really care to know his name, you have to learn it, basically.
And you know what? I noticed that kids don't have an issue, probably because they learn new names at school all the time and because kids are kind of more... their tongues are lighter when it comes to learning languages. True. It's when you become an adult, your tongue gets so heavy to pronounce things that you're not accustomed to. Yeah. And so kids, even if they mispronounce it accidentally, but they don't make a big deal one way or the other. Well, as soon as you tell them oh, okay, his name is this. But the adults, when you tell them, they make a face how do I say that? So yeah, I thought about that when you first told me that name, but I just was like, okay, I'll figure out how to deal with it because I do like the name and I genuinely like the name. So, I like the significance of the name and so on and so forth. Yeah. God is wise because, 2 other things about it. This is very insignificant, but I'll say it anyway. There was one name that I had in mind for a boy that I don't even know if I told you, or it has a couple of variations. And this name is actually somewhat close. It's a short name that begins with N. So, yeah, but it doesn't have any significance. It just sounds nice to my ears, kind of thing. So I think God is wise in teaching me, or in enlightening, what's the word? I don't know. Enlightening me to, I'm misusing that, to let you take the lead on naming and not like have a fuss about it, because I think it is good and important that names do have some kind of significance besides it just sounds nice.
I agree.
So
I agree.
yeah, and so I think I would have leaned toward it sounds nice, as opposed to this name actually has a deep significance. So I'm glad that you named them. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think ultimately names matter.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not for everything, but they still matter.
Mm-hmm.
The name
They're
you
not
carry.
nothing. They're not everything, but they're not
Yeah,
nothing.
it's almost it's almost like your first step into identity as a human being. It captures your identity, which is yet to be, let's say discovered or unraveled or whatever. But it's like the entry point. Your name is how people come into you or come into your space. 'Cause they call your name to invite you, or they call your name to ask for permission to come into your space. So your name is names are very important. Like we've said, they're not like overly important, and they're not like some. Let's not get into some deep stuff that we can't really understand. But the point is, we can all agree that names do matter. Names are important, and so if you're gonna choose a name, I guess it's better to choose a name that has a level of significance to you. It may not be to everybody, but to you, it has meaning. And that's why you read the Bible maybe after a war or after securing a certain victory, people will come up with names not only for human beings but even for
Altars,
places.
they put like a stone, and then they would say,
right. Jacob will call a place Ebenezer or something like that. So names,
that's whatever.
right? Names carry something that form, or some things that form part of our history. So if you think of life as one big story, names do matter. Names mark certain maybe time frames or epochs or whatever the term is, where we can stop to reason about certain things. People name their kids COVID. For real. It's true. So think about this. 200 years later, we would look back to certain names and we would wonder what was the first time this name was used? How did this name come about? And then it will link back to the history. In 2020, there was an outbreak called COVID-19. And some of the kids were named, like Alex COVID, and COVID. Some people form compound names.
Yeah, just
COVID Ann, COVID Marie, something like that. It's true. Look it up. Or maybe I made these ones up, but it's true. Some kids name some parents name their kids COVID. Some kind of variation, some variation of it. Ann COVID, COVID Ann, Marie COVID, COVID Marie, or whatever it is. Alex Peter COVID, something like that. And we can look back, after many years to find a meaning, and it will give us a whole lot about the time or the time frame. Yeah. Oh gosh, I should be on the news just for this. Yeah.
You don't look at you with a straight face. Maybe you turn to look at me with a straight face.
Oh boy. It is so true. Silly. It is true. It's true.
Anyway. So I think that's about it, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. Ultimately, I think. Sorry. I think what matters here is how we are able to work together, right?
Yeah.
It reminds me of the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth. They went through a similar thing, right? The angel visited Zechariah and he got the name. Elizabeth wasn't there, but because he doubted, he became mute. But he had to find a way to communicate that to his wife. So during the naming ceremony, because he couldn't talk, they asked the wife, Elizabeth, and Elizabeth said, the child's name is John. And everyone exclaimed. They were like, John? There's no one in your family called John. Where did you even get this name? And then they bypassed that and they said, we have to talk to your husband. We don't know this name. And then he asked for a sheet or a paper or whatever, and he scribbled the name on it. It was the same name. The value here for me is that they were one. See? So when they went to Zechariah, he had given them a different name from what Elizabeth had given, then they would be misaligned. I think that matters more to me. How that we're able to sit and talk about it. I'm able to, give you the name and yeah, that sounds pretty good. And then you might ask me, what's the meaning? And then I'll tell you the meaning behind that or whatever. And then we have a whole conversation about it. But we are one. It's just an opportunity for us to become more like just improve our bond and become more intimate and become more one. And I like that. I like the back and forth we have. It's very candid. It's fun for me, quite frankly. When we have these conversations, like, well, it's been 4 days, we don't have a name yet. Yeah. What do we do? It's like, well, just give me one more day. I'll get back to you with maybe a name or names, and we can talk about it. And then I'll ask you, have you thought of any name? And you're like, no, not quite. It's fun. I think it's good. This is the beauty of marriage. So for me, that's more valuable than anything. Yeah. And I like that.
Yeah. I guess it's not exactly a takeaway because it's not like from a summary perspective, but just a concluding thought. Yeah, about it, naming your children, like how to approach that with your spouse. I feel like do look for significance. I think that's good. That is something we talked about anyway. I do think inquire of the Lord. I did pray about it, but it's not like I prayed. I didn't fast over it. I mean, you can't fast, or you ought not to fast seriously when you're pregnant anyway from food. Yeah. But you can pray and fast over it. Husbands can fast over it and see if the Lord, would reveal something to you. But he may not always tell you, name your child this, okay? And if he doesn't tell you that, it's okay. You can still go ahead and name your child. I mean, you have to. You don't have a choice anyway.
It's cool, man.
And just try to choose something significant and, agree with your spouse. It's a big deal, but because it's their name for their whole life. But there's a sense in which it's just not a big deal too. Like I said, their name doesn't dictate everything about their life. Their name could, their name doesn't dictate everything about their life. That's the point. So I think, and I don't know if, I suppose I would advise just let the man choose let your husband choose the name too. I don't know. You can take that with a grain of salt too. There's nothing in the Bible that says such, but I think in the sense of him being a leader and just giving him that honor, I think is good. And you can talk about it together. So I'm not saying you shouldn't or wouldn't have any input whatsoever, but I think it is like an honorable thing to, or a way to honor your husband. Wives, it's a way to honor your husband to just say, you know what? Yeah, let me let you make the final decision on this. Yeah.
I agree. Think about this. I'm not going to say COVID. Adam named things that God made. See, I think God has given us the right.
Eve, right?
Right. Adam named
so
Eve.
There you go. I mean,
so in man,
there's Bible for this.
Right. In man, I do think ultimately, as a woman or as a wife, if you yield to your husband, you are honoring God personally, which you have done tremendously. But I also think that if you do it right, you could always suggest names to your husband.
Right.
Your husband is more likely to listen to you, especially when he doesn't have any name prepped. Like, well, yeah, that sounds good. You like that? Like, yeah, I think it's a nice name. He's more likely to go with it if you do it right. But what I want to say is, don't get stuck in waiting on the Lord for a name. This is one of the areas where it's very clear that God has given man the mandate to name things.
That's good, babe.
Don't go like this and fast for 10 days. waiting for God to give you a name when he has clearly demonstrated in scripture that he put the mandate in man, even after he had created everything, to name things. Why are you bothering the man?
You know what? That's good. And also, to be fair, the times that I can recall anyway, where God did give names, they weren't praying and fasting for a name per se. That was God's prerogative to do. And he, you know, and that's something I noticed a lot about prophecy and stuff. That's a whole different topic, but
it is.
You know, God does as he wills. And if he wants to give you a name, he doesn't even need you to pray into it. He'll just send an angel to give you the name or whatever the case. So
yeah,
I'm not saying don't pray into it, but just saying God is God. So
yeah, I think it's just beautiful to walk with God. And you know, not just this, but other things you do in life. It's beautiful to walk with him. When you have a partner that you constantly communicate with, you can reason with him, right? I'm thinking of this name, I'm thinking of that name, but I'm not sure. Would you want to tell me something? And he might, you know, impress something on your heart or lead you in one way. I think we can also, as husbands, submit ourselves. Not can, we ought to submit ourselves before God. Yes, he has given us the room, but he won't drive you away when you say, I'm really torn between this name and that name, and just communicate with him. In that sense, yes, pray. But if you are just hoping that God will show up in a dream or he will send a prophet to tell you your child's name, your child has to be named after this person or that person, you're not taking your space or your place in God. He has called you to name. That is the mandate he gave to Adam. God has given you the mandate to name your child. He's not mad that you decided to name your son or your daughter after this person or after that person. He's actually more likely pleased that you are stepping into what he has called man, taking dominion and saying, I would name this boy this name because of that. And that's very consistent across the Bible, right? You are not at fault. God is not going to, why didn't you ask me what to name the child? No. He's spoken clearly about that. Name things, take dominion, and thank him for that. That's all. Just thank him for giving you the gift in a child, to receive the gift, just like Adam received God's creation, and say, I'll call this one a lion. And in the end, what did God say? He looked at everything he had made, and I believe even including Adam's naming, and he called everything good. It's good.
You're making me think. I hope I'm not over philosophizing or something, but just really quick before we get off, like things were named with significance, like cities were named after tribes or after clans, after family names and stuff. Altars were named after, you know, certain happenings or events, things like that. But when Adam first named everything, was there significance to the extent, you know, he was the origin man being or whatever? Or you know what, to be fair, maybe there was significance in the sense that like he was kind of, I don't know how language, you know, sort of came to be, but everything was already formed. So he would look at a thing and name it. So I mean, I suppose there was a significance in the sense of he looks at a bird, it flies, it has these characteristics, I'm going to name it blah, you know. I was just thinking because of I'm saying that because of my earlier comments about naming things based on, it sounds nice or whatever. Like, I mean, perhaps he did just make names, you know. No, I don't know. That's an interesting thing to think about, like the process of naming things when the earth was first formed. But anyway,
I mean, sounds nice could also be a value. Just it sounds great.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's a beautiful animal. I'll give it a beautiful name.
Right. And I think there's more to names than just what is said, because, you know, we read from even Genesis, the beginning of Genesis, from the creation story, that God made heaven and earth. Is it heaven and earth as it is, or the words heaven and earth? You know, and God made all these animals, the beasts of the earth, and the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea, and this and that. Were they, so did God give names before Adam came to name more? or he just made things, and we are describing those things. So names go beyond just words that we speak, and that's why I think it's relevant to have some meaning to them. But it's up to you. I think you should step in. If you are a husband or a wife, you two sit down. Whatever you choose, whatever you decide to name your child, it's yay and done. You know, it's done. God is pleased with it. God will take that and work with it. And that is, I think, what is also beautiful about how God works with man. You know, God gives you the gifts of a child. You name the child, and God says, all right, let's go to work. And then you start nurturing the child. So I don't think it's, my point in saying that was to say you shouldn't get overly, like, I'm waiting on the Lord. I haven't heard from God. This is not something that should send you kneeling before another man or pastor just to get a name, like you're a man, you're a Christian, you name the child and God will be happy with you. You don't need some soothsayer, some prophet. What do you see about the child? What should I name it? Oh, just don't do that. It's I think I even consider that pagan. You have been walking with God, hopefully. Name the child and God will be pleased with you. And just move on.
Lastly, this is, I don't know, you can cut this out if you want. I'm just like talking as if I was talking to you about it because I find the topic interesting. Yeah. Then I was thinking about how there's different names in different languages and stuff, and how, just to go back to, so we're like toggling back and forth between names are significant, names are not that significant. So yeah, the name is significant, but then like when you think about places even have different names in different cultures, and people even have different names. Like if you look at the names in the Bible, James, is Jacques in French, there's like different. So it's like how important, I know that's more of a pronunciation thing. So I guess the significance is more of a deeper significance about the, than just like how it's spelled or what it says or what, how to say it or whatever. But like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It's just interesting to think about.
Yeah. And remember I said that some names could even mean differently. I mean different things in different cultures, right? There might be a name.
Right.
It may not be Thomas as we say it, but maybe it's Toma or something like that. And to some people, it doesn't mean what it means in English.
Right. So, that's a good point.
It's beautiful. They're all good.
Yeah.
Okay. It means what it means to them. It means what it means to them. It means what it means to us. And it's all good. When we meet one day and you're Thomas, I'm Thomas too. What does it mean? Like, it means this. Oh, mine means that. Like, well, it only shows that.
It reminds me of the gods.
Right.
How when we learned in mythology and they would have different names.
Like Roman and Greek gods. Like Roman and Greek gods, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. Right. Like that. So, but it's all good. It only shows where you had the name. But the meaning is still what it means to you and where you come from.
Okay, enough of our ramblings. These are the kind of conversations we have all the time. Thomas and I like to just banter about different things. So that's just our little end of topic banter. But thank you for tuning in. As you can see, this guy's awake and fussy, probably ready to have some more milk. So
yep.
We will end it here. Thank you for watching.
Thank you. And share your experiences with us.
Yes,
let us know.
Comment below.
How did you name your children or child? How did the conversation go with your spouse? And did you just share your experiences with us? We are very happy reading your experiences as well. Yeah.
Love you.
See you in the next one. Love you.
Little guy. So you just woke up fussy.
He's awake and he's squirmy.
He is definitely squirmy.
You awake? You squirmy?